Super fights. The UFC was literally built on them. Royce Gracie's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu versus Ken Shamrock's shoot fighting style. Gerard Gordeau's kickboxing versus Tila Tuli's sumo style. The early UFC was the Wild West, and super fights were the norm. But the introduction to weight classes later on would change the fighting landscape forever, making super fights a rare thing of the past. That's why the matchup between Alexander Volkanovski and Islam Makhachev deserves way more attention. The pound for pound #1 in the world versus the pound for pound #2, champion versus champion, a fight for the ages. But let's see how it stacks up with the all-time modern super fights. Here's my top 5. At number 5, we have Conor McGregor versus Eddie Alvarez. At this point, Conor already steamrolled Jose Aldo for the 145 belt and was coming off a revenge win over Nate Diaz. And now at UFC 205 against Eddie Alvarez, Conor would try and make UFC history by becoming the UFC's first ever simultaneous champ. Conor was victorious in dominant fashion, and the event now ranks in the top 10 all-time for UFC pay-per-view buys. At number 4, we have the first fight between Daniel Cormier, DC, and Stipe Miocic. Both fighters made successful title defenses in January 2018 on the same card. Following that, DC and Stipe were scheduled to face off in July for the heavyweight belt. They were at the top of their respective divisions, right near their primes, and this fight made for a great beginning to a trilogy series that would take place over the next few years. While the matchup was incredible for MMA fans around the world, the pay-per-view numbers were surprisingly low at just 380,000 buys. Number 3 is going to be Volkanovski versus Islam, which takes place this Saturday, February 11th. This matchup is as big as it possibly gets. The #1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world takes on the #2. And to make it even better, both of these fighters are smack dab in the center of their primes. Volkanovski has 3 wins over the legendary Max Holloway, and Islam Makhachev is coming off a dominant win over a dominant champ in Charles Oliveira. Unfortunately, the pay-per-view card hasn't been built to match this super fight, so the numbers aren't expected to be great, but the matchup surely won't disappoint. At number 2, we have the original champ versus champ super fight in GSP versus BJ Penn. Now, the numbers don't quite back it up, but the talent was unmatched. In this fight, we had prime GSP, who's considered one of the greatest fighters of all time, versus prime BJ Penn, who at that point in time was seen as one of the best pound-for-pound fighters in the world. Plus, it was a rematch from a fight that resulted in a split decision just a few years back. And now both fighters were champions in their respective divisions, putting it all on the line. This was the original champ versus champ super fight. Very rarely do you get 2 guys of this caliber going at it. But the pay-per-view buys just don't back it up, so I can't put it in that #1 spot. Speaking of which, at number 1, we have to go with Khabib versus Conor. Not only was the hype incredible going into this fight, but history will show that this is an all-time popular event. Today, it's still the #1 ranked pay-per-view in terms of buys, with 2.4 million. Going into it, Khabib won the vacant belt against Al Iaquinta, while Conor was coming off his big break from MMA to box Floyd Mayweather. The press conference was exhilarating. The fight was fun. The post-fight brawl was wild. Conor attacked Khabib's bust beforehand. It was absolute madness, and this super fight was a supreme rarity we may never witness again. It has to be my #1. Thanks for watching my video, guys. I'm Steve with the MMA Minute, and I'll see you next time.